I was in elementary school when the first time I saw a computer in a classroom. It was an Apple IIe. Ooh. Green cathode ray tube screen, and for the most part, nobody had any idea what to do with it. There were a couple of educational games that we were supposed to play, but they got pretty boring pretty fast. And then in junior high, I remember we actually had computer literacy as a class. I think it was 7th grade. And I'm not real sure what we did or what we learned. I do remember that at some point the instructor went to the chalkboard and wrote out a phrase. First it was 4 letters, G-I-G-O, and then he spelled it out beneath, and it said, garbage in, garbage out. And then he spent, I don't know, it felt like forever explaining to us that the way a computer works is that it produces what you ask it to produce. And so if you write terrible code, if you tell it bad stuff, if you put in bad stuff to the computer program, guess what you get out? You get terrible stuff. Garbage in, garbage out. Oh, that makes sense. Not that we were doing a lot of high-level programming, but that phrase has stuck in my head ever since. Computers are a lot more complicated now. If you're watching this, you're watching on a computer. We have computers all around us, so much so that we really have just turned our phone into mobile computers that we carry around everywhere we go. You probably have a phone at least, and maybe a tablet, and maybe you have a PC at home. Your TV functions in a lot of ways like a computer. It's extraordinary, the things that are happening now. And I gotta tell you, I am not a computer expert. When something breaks, I am grateful that I have a spouse who works in technology so that I can say, Jen, many of you have partners or friends that you call on when the computer breaks. So I don't know that I'm gonna get all of this right. But I think I understand enough about computers to know that there are the applications and the programs that we use. Zoom to connect with one another. We use that a lot. Facebook, of course. So many of us connect with family and friends around the world in Facebook. Twitter and YouTube, all of those are programs that do a specific kind of task, or sometimes several kinds of tasks. But there's also the operating system, and that's the kind of thing that you see in Windows, or if you're a Mac person, the OS there, OS whatever it's called now, I don't know, Spotted Elephant or whatever name they've come up with it lately. That's the operating system. That's the thing that you see and interact with to open the various programs. What you might not know is that underneath and behind, that you never see the operating system, behind all that stuff that you do see, there's another thing that works called BIOS. I have no idea if I'm pronouncing that right, if it's BIOS, B-I-O-S. And that stands for Basic Input-Output System. Now we're getting somewhere. Because when you turn on a computer, of course, the first thing that pops up is not Windows. It does all this kind of weird stuff. And you just kind of wait for it to kick on, and then it opens up to the screen that you're familiar with, and then you can start using it. The BIOS, the B-I-O-S system, is that kind of thing that tells your computer what to do behind the scenes to open up Windows or all the other things that you have so that it can function. Now, from time to time, our computers go bad. An application will quit working, it gets corrupted, or sometimes even Windows goes bad, and that's, oh man, the operating system goes bad. Sometimes it's a pain to get that going again. But if your BIOS goes bad, that's big trouble. Because at that level, that affects everything else. And if that's not working, nothing works. And now we've reached the end of my understanding of computers. But here's what I hope you get from that, is that there are programs that we use. There are operating systems that help us use the programs we use. And then behind that, unseen for the most part, is a system that helps everything function, that impacts everything that happens on our computer. And when it's bad, everything gets messed up. Jesus says to his disciples, it's not what you eat that defiles you. It's what comes out of your mouth, not what goes in. It's what comes out of your mouth That is what defiles you. Now, Jesus is not here trying to totally scrap the idea of keeping kosher, of following the Jewish dietary practices. What he's saying is that they are not magical. There are perfectly good reasons to follow the kosher laws if you're a Jewish person, because they help to form identity. They have to be a reminder. They become a spiritual discipline. But they're not magical in the sense that if you accidentally or even intentionally consume something that you're not supposed to, that somehow God is now done with you. Sorry, somebody just stepped in the hallway there, and it caught my attention. So I think that's what Jesus is getting at, is that it's not about something magical that happens. He is saying that if you really want to measure a person's value and worth, if you really want to know what they're really about, if you want to know their heart and their mind, if you want a glimpse of their soul, listen to what they say. See what they do. Because that stuff, Jesus says, proceeds from the heart. And while we might sometimes be able to fake it, well, it doesn't really work long term to try and fake who we are. We're out of alignment when our heart and our words don't line up. I've never been to a chiropractor, but as far as I understand, the whole sermon today is about things that I don't really understand, apparently, computers and chiropractors. As I understand, the theory of chiropractic is that our spinal column, because it's such a vital part of our internal structure, it's sort of what binds all of us together, holds us upright, and it's connected to so many other parts of us, both physically through the bones, but also physically through the nerves and up and down our spinal column, that when that gets out of alignment, it has huge impact on other parts of our body, all the interconnected systems that help us to live and function. So, you go in for an adjustment. You get your spine put back in alignment, and everything starts to work a little bit better. The only interaction I've ever actually had with chiropractors, I was the Ada County Fair years and years and years ago, like 25 years ago in Boise, Idaho. I went to the county fair, and they had like the vendors building, and you could go and whatever, look at all the vendors. And they had two chiropractors sort of set up on opposite sides of the building. And I went to one, and it was like a free assessment, and they did this thing with these wires, and they had you stand there, and they told you where you were out of alignment. So I went to one, and I stood there, and they did the thing. They said, well, here, your pelvis is this way, and this is this way, and this. And, oh, cool. So I took that piece of paper, and I folded it in my pocket. I went to the next chiropractor. And they did the same kind of analysis, and they said, well, your pelvis is, and it was the opposite of what the first chiropractor told me. Now, I'm not going to hold that against them because it was the county fair. So, and they were in a rush, and I was standing there in whatever I was wearing. They weren't really doing a full exam. But I don't doubt that I'm out of alignment, that my spine is a little bit wonky. So chiropractors tell us that if the central sort of operating system of our bodies, if the spine and spinal cord are out of alignment, it impacts the other parts of our physical ability to function. So computers and chiropractors and Jesus all tell us that when something is out of alignment, it affects everything else. If our heart is not aligned with the Spirit of God, with the good news of who God is in terms of the work of bringing love and peace and justice into this world, we spew out hate. We spew out anger. We speak against folks in ways that are harmful. People have been asking out loud and in public, and people have asked me sometimes, why it is that we have to spend so much time talking about racism or homophobia or misogyny. Isn't it enough that we just love people? And here's why it's important that we have those hard conversations. Because we grew up in a system, in a culture, in a society that shapes how we see the world. We grow up in a system that gives privilege to white, straight, cisgender men. All of us do. And it's not that we even have to grow up thinking we hate those people who are different than us, but that kind of bias gets written into that underlying code in our lives. It's part of our heart and soul. We don't even see it. But when it's corrupted, it affects everything else around us. It becomes the way that we see the world without even realizing it. So our work as faithful disciples is to try and rewrite that code. And you can't fix it until you know what's wrong. You can't adjust a spine as a chiropractor until you know where it is out of alignment. You can't fix the BIOS system in a computer until you know which parts of the code are broken. We can't adjust our lives to be more aligned with the work of God in the world until we know how it is that we're not fitting in what God would have us be. It's what comes out of our mouths, says Jesus, that defiles us. Not just as individuals, but as a community and as a people. And there's plenty of that around, isn't there? And it's hard not to get swept up in it, isn't it? I hear people say harmful, hateful things about people of color. And I want to tell them they can go to hell. That they have so missed the mark that they are Antichrist. And I think in many cases they are, but for most folks, it's not a willful hate. It's that they're out of alignment. And it's hard not to get dragged down in a culture that empowers people who speak bluntly, with anger, with hate. We don't give as much time or attention to the people who speak of the subtleties and complications of life. We tend to focus on the ones who can say in 1 minute what's wrong with everybody else. It's hard not to get caught up in that. But part of our work as disciples of Jesus is to be so rooted in love that it's what naturally flows out in our lives. We do Bible studies, and we invite you into prayer groups. We do all kinds of things as followers of Jesus in this congregation. And all of them have one purpose, and that is to help us be more firmly rooted in love. When we do a Bible study, we might sometimes talk about Hebrew and Greek. But honestly, Jesus doesn't care how well you understand the complex histories of translation of the Bible if it doesn't make you more loving. We have a contemplative practices group, Tuesdays, 5:30. You should join us. But God doesn't care how often you participate in contemplative practices or some other gathering that helps you learn more about forms of prayer and conversation if they don't make you more loving. Jesus does not take attendance in worship, in person or online. Because Jesus doesn't care how often you attend worship, or even if you make notes during the sermon, or if you go to 5 churches on a Sunday, if it doesn't make you more loving. This is the call. To be just and kind and peacemaking and loving in our world. It's what comes out of us that helps people understand who it is that God is. It's what comes out of us that makes the world more holy and just and loving. So my prayer for you, for all of us, is that we might find those practices, those daily habits of study and prayer and fellowship and connection and silence and contemplation and reading that will make us more deeply rooted in love, so that what comes out of us is good and holy. And that, my friends, is the good news. Thanks be to God. Amen.